on their citizens, erecting firewalls like iron curtains and closing down websites. We ask, is cyber-generated change virtual or real? Empire at this time on Al Jazeera.
The relocation of the Ahmadiyya has magnified the issue of religious intolerance in Indonesia. Is this inevitable in a multicultural society? And is the government turning a blind eye?
101 East at this time on Al Jazeera.
Fighting on the latest Libyan front line, both pro- and anti-Gaddafi forces claim they control oil-rich Brega. Hello, I'm Imran Gupta. It's 0000 hours GMT. This is Al Jazeera, live from Doha. Also ahead, as tens of thousands of people scramble to get out of Libya, the United Nations appeals for help to keep them safe. Plus, signs of a shift in Yemen as its president agrees to work with the opposition. We begin in Libya, where it's just gone 2 in the morning. The country's embattled leader has given yet another public address, again giving the impression that the situation is being spun out of control. Muammar Gaddafi also warned against foreign intervention and vowed to fight until the last man. But his forces don't appear to be having much success. On Wednesday, there was a fierce fight in the strategic port town of Brega between forces loyal to Gaddafi and opposition fighters. Both sides say they now control the area. Brega is a large oil refinery, which is apparently still held by, it has a large oil refinery rather, which is apparently still being held by anti-Gaddafi forces. Now, those forces got a much needed boost from the town of Benghazi, which is the epicenter of the uprising in the east of the country. Gaddafi's forces also raided an arms depot in the city of Ajdabia, which too is under opposition control. But it's not just the east. The opposition controls the towns of Zawiya and Misrata near the capital, Tripoli. Al Jazeera's Tony Bertley is in Brega. He spoke to my colleague Lauren Taylor about the situation there.
The Air Force jet circled again, and this time it bombed the group of fighters we were with. They're strung out on a long stretch of the main highway here, and a huge explosion happened about 60 meters away from us, and it sent everyone scurrying. Second attack by the jet. It's going to show that there's heavy fighting going on in the town of Brega. We can't exactly see what's going on. We've been told that something like 250 to 300 pro-Gaddafi fighters are inside the town, and they are surrounded, we are told. It is a little bit chaotic. It's a little bit confusing to get the exact details of what is going on, but that's the story they're telling us here. I have to say it's a little bit disorganized. There's a lot of weaponry around, but there doesn't seem to be much in the terms of leadership here directing them. But at the moment, they're flying around, we're glad to say, but it was a very near miss.
Tony, yes, it does sound very close to you. Give us an idea of how many fighters you're with at the moment and a bit more of the scale of the opposition movement there.
6,000 are coming. You're not exactly sure that what you're being told is actually what's going to happen, but that's what we've been told.
Meanwhile, thousands of Gaddafi's supporters gathered on Wednesday in his stronghold, Tripoli. They chanted pro-Gaddafi slogans as they gathered in the city's Green Square. The rally came as the Libyan leader gave yet another lengthy speech, lasting 3 hours this time. Again, he's vowed to hang on to power. He also lashed out at the West for interfering and warned that thousands of Libyans will die if US and NATO forces intervene in the conflict. Huda Abdel Hamid reports from the eastern opposition stronghold of Benghazi, where the opposition has been celebrating its gains.
Tensions are high in Benghazi as Gaddafi loyalist forces reach the oil fields of Brega, just 200 kilometers away. On the streets, calls for men to defend their city and demands for quick action from the international community.
We want the UN to impose no-fly zones so their planes cannot fly, close the sky.
A demand that went one step further in a formal request by the newly formed Transitional National Council.
We call on the UN to take the necessary steps to stop the massacre of the people by mercenaries and other forces. We call on the UN to denounce countries which are supporting the regime. We call on the international community to carry out pinpointed airstrikes on the mercenaries.
Since the beginning of the uprising, the opposition has been accusing African mercenaries of fighting along Gaddafi loyalists and admits it only has limited defense force. Feeling a counter-offensive may be fast approaching, volunteers now are mobilizing not only to protect Benghazi, but they say they're ready to go wherever the fight will be and to liberate other cities of Libya. Most of the volunteers have no experience in warfare and need expert help. Hundreds are said to have already gone to the fight. Many more are getting ready. There is a sense of urgency. Many in the East would like the international community to provide air support so long as there are no boots on the ground. Khuda Abdelhamid, AlJazeera, Benghazi.
The Arab League says it could impose a no-fly zone over Libya if fighting continues. The group's Secretary General says this action could be taken in coordination with the African Union.
We'll continue consultations on the best way to protect and guarantee the safety and security of the Libyan people and that of the Arab nations. We will not remain idle in light of the bloodshed that the Libyan people are facing, and therefore we may resort to a no-fly zone, and the Arab League and African Union are cooperating in this regard.
Well, as the fighting in Libya continues, the US government insists a no-fly zone for Libya is still on the table, but other nations have reservations. Russia and China have suggested it wouldn't work. John Terrett has more.
Remarks from senior officials in the Obama administration reveal the challenges faced when dealing with Libya. Hours before heavy hitters gave testimony on Capitol Hill, the US Senate unanimously approved a non-binding resolution that calls on the UN to impose a no-fly zone over Libya, a popular idea with many in Washington.
Well, I think that everyone is worried about what's happening and wants to put an end to it. No one wants to let this go on.
But with increasing concerns being voiced from UN and NATO members, administration officials are pointing out how difficult it would be to establish a no-fly zone over Libya.
And let's just call a spade a spade. A no-fly zone begins with an attack on Libya to destroy the air defenses. That's the way you do a no-fly zone.
Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said the administration's worried Libya could become a giant Somalia, and she drew parallels between a potential no-fly zone for Libya and circumstances in the Balkans 2 decades ago.
The difficulty of it, the maintenance of it, the appearance of it, and eventually it was determined that it was in the interests of the peace and stability of the region, etc.
At Wednesday's White House briefing, Libya was third on the agenda behind the shootings of US service personnel in Germany and domestic budget issues.
The no-fly zone is an option that is being actively considered. It is, as are other options.
Even though the Arab League and the African Union